It's a wild time to be a kid growing up in the 90s. I mean, just last week or the week before, we lost Kevin Conroy. And in case y'all don't know who Kevin Conroy is, he is the famous voice of Batman on the animated series that came out in the early 90s. And he also did the voice of Batman in the different video games as well. I think he might have done this voice of Batman in like the Justice League series as well. Like his voice just became infamous, or not infamous, but famous for that portrayal, to the point where it was just so iconic that you couldn't really see anyone else doing that voice but him. But we lost him a couple weeks ago. I believe he was 62, if I'm not mistaken. Now fast forward to 2 weeks later and we lose a icon for us kids who grew up in the 90s. Any kid who grew up in the 90s knows about the Power Rangers. Whether you watched it, or whether you was in that small percentage of those who didn't watch it, or in the vast majority of those who did, including myself, watched the Power Rangers. And literally that show helped solidify our childhood. Even adults were watching the Power Rangers. That's just how impactful that series was back in the 90s. I believe it came out in 93. So I was 4 years old when the Power Rangers came out. And it's crazy because, speaking of Batman, the animated series, that came out in 92 and this came out a year later, and they both aired on Fox. So I thought that was just interesting. You know, they both were on the same network with each other. But the Power Rangers definitely places, or has a very special place in my heart, but none other especially than Tommy, aka the Green Ranger, aka the White Ranger. So in case y'all are unaware, Jason David Frank, who is this man right here, who is famously known for playing Tommy the White Ranger, well, he was the Green Ranger and then he became the White Ranger on the Power Rangers, passed away at the age of 49 due to allegedly what they're saying is a suicide. Now, what's crazy is I actually followed him on Instagram. I actually followed all the original Power Ranger characters on Instagram. And this guy was very active, and active physically and active with his fans. And in case y'all didn't know, this guy was a real life martial artist. I believe he was a 3rd-degree black belt. He was very active. And, you know, he went to the different conventions. He was very active with his fans. He was very approachable. Like I was reading through the comments and everyone had nothing but nice things to say about this man. I follow Walter Jones. I believe his name is Walter Jones, the guy who played the Black Ranger. And he had posted a video, and basically in the caption, he says, like, this was, who would have thought this would have been the last time I would have hugged my friend? And it was at a convention that he was recently at, and he gave him a hug, and it was one of them long hugs, you know, like them energy transference of energy type of hugs. And it's almost as if it's like, did Jason know that this would probably be the end? Like, did he plan to commit suicide, or was this just something that just happened? And it's really, you know, it's really sad when you as a kid are growing up and you see people like this on TV and you idolize them so much, and then you get older and then realize that they go through things as well. You just never know what goes on behind the scenes, because a lot of people say what was really going on with him, because whenever we would see him, he was always happy, he was always taking pictures with people, he just seemed like full of life. And just to know that this man committed suicide means that there was something going on in his personal life that he just didn't let people in on. And that's the thing, he just kept his private life private. He wasn't out there like that, so you never knew what he was going through. You never know what a person is going through behind the scenes, because they can be one of the people that's, you know, depressed where their depression shows, or they can be them depressed people that hides it behind a smile. And apparently he was one that hid it behind a smile and always being jovial, you know, and cordial with his fans, because he didn't want to have his personal life bleed out to his fans, because he feels like, you know, my fans do not need to see me in this light. They don't need to see me this way. Now, what makes him one of the most famous Power Rangers is because he's one of the most recognizable ones, and he, I believe, was in so many spinoffs, like where a lot of the original Power Ranger characters just dropped off and might maybe faded into obscurity, or maybe just stopped acting, or maybe did other things outside of it. He literally was almost in love with this franchise, or maybe because the franchise loved him back. And he was in so many spinoffs, like the different movies, the different shows. Like, I'm gonna be honest, after the second Power Ranger movie, I fell off. Like I couldn't get into that the space one or the dino one. After all of that, but after the second movie, I completely fell off. But that first movie, the one with Ivan Ooze, listen, my 6-year-old self in 1995 could barely contain myself. And any other kid back then knew that that first Power Rangers movie was fire. Ivan Ooze as a villain, elite. Those ninja costumes, oh my God. Like, y'all can hear it in my voice right now. Power Rangers was such an iconic time in the 90s. That whole period was just great in every sense of the word. But the Power Rangers was just something special. I told myself one day I'm gonna go down to Angel Grove and I'm gonna go to the command center and chop it up with Alpha 5 and Zordon. You know why the Power Rangers are out there fulfilling the mission? I'm gonna sneak into the command center somehow, some way. You know, unfortunately that didn't happen because, you know, Angel Grove is not a real place. You know, you grow up and you realize these type of things, but as a kid, you can't tell us that that wasn't real. And, you know, the Power Rangers was, you know, was almost up there with icon status like Barney or any other type of character that was out at the time that us kids at the time looked up to. And I can't tell you how many arguments and almost fights broke out when so many kids used to pretend to be Power Rangers and they would compete to see who was going to be the green or the white ranger. Those of us who grew up in the 90s knows exactly what I'm talking about. And what was so iconic about the Green Ranger is that he had an edge to him that the other Rangers didn't have. You know, the other Rangers, they were cool and all, but Tommy had an edge to him. He was a badass. And I think that's what they needed on the show to kind of tip the scale, because the Green Ranger or Tommy was never always good. He came in as almost like a bad guy or anti-hero, so to speak. And then eventually he turned and became a good guy, but still was a badass at the same time. And you know, that Green Ranger, that's the thing. The suits, the Power Rangers, they all had their nice little suits, but their suits were all the same. They just had a different color variation. But the Green Ranger, he had the green metallic suit on with the gold shoulder pads that was shining and that flute. Anybody knows that the dagger flute is iconic too. Anything that can be used as a weapon, he can just turn around and use it as an instrument to summon his Zord out of the water. Come on now, this is iconic stuff right here. And then to top it all off, they said, the Green Ranger, that's nice and all, but we about to give you an upgrade. We're going to change your suit from green to white. And that was even better, because then his suit still stood out. If you looked at the Power Ranger movie poster, he's dead front and center because his suit stands out above all the rest of them. Like, this is my childhood literally coming back to the surface right now. Like, I said, if I had a time machine and I can go back to that time, I wouldn't change a thing. These were just great times. And it's, you know, it's a sad occasion. It's a sad state of affairs because this man is no longer here and because he committed suicide allegedly. But it brings back so many memories for myself and others who grew up at that time and just had an imagination of what life was like at that time, pre-adulting things. This is exactly why our parents told us, remain a kid as long as you possibly can. Don't be in a rush to grow up. It's because of stuff like this. But now all we are going to have is the memories. And Jason David Frank playing Tommy on Power Rangers definitely is a long-lasting memory to have. Kids of today, let me tell y'all have no clue how much the Power Rangers and this character in particular meant to us growing up. I'm talking about people will have Power Ranger parties, you know, Power Ranger lunchboxes, Power Ranger stickers, Power Ranger book bags, Power Ranger Halloween costumes. Like, it was literally everywhere. You could not escape it. It was one of those things right there. They used to have like Power Rangers conventions and live shows and performances. It was a big deal during that time. And I'm so passionate about it because this, again, I reiterate, was a huge part of my childhood. Just like you can have your parents tell you things that happened in their childhood, this right here was a huge part for me growing up, for sure. That the 90s was called the golden era for a reason. Television, movies, music, all of that, fashion. It was definitely a great time to be alive. But I can go on and on and on, but I'm just going to end it off and say this. RIP to Jason David Frank, aka the Green Ranger and the White Ranger. And he is now officially the second person, the second Power Ranger of the original lineup to pass away. Because if you don't remember, the actress who played Trini, I can't pronounce her name. She passed back in 2001, I believe. I think she passed in 2001 from an illness. I forgot what she had. I don't want to say it was cancer, and it wasn't cancer, but I do know she had an illness. So he is the second person, the second Power Ranger to pass away. But I feel like all my 90s kids and all my late 80s kids just got some kind of an awakening right now, just me going through all of this. So I can't wait to see what y'all have to say about this down in the comments.